staff, and I'll be emceeing the listening session tonight. I want to thank you all for being here. We moved the date of the listening session based on your feedback so that we could hold this before the assembly meeting tomorrow. As you can see, we have a more robust team on stage to help provide an overview of the proposed navigation center and to answer your questions. On stage are Mayor Bronson, Community Development Director Adam Trombley, Health Director Joe Gerace, M&O Director Saxton Shearer, Laquita Shimolowski from Dowell Engineering, Purchasing Director Rochelle Alger, OMB Director Cheryl Frasca, and Assembly members John Weddleton and Felix Rivera, who are part of the facilitated work group. We're going to run through a brief presentation while we hear from folks on stage and then go on to the Q&A portion of the evening. Before we do that, I want to provide a high-level overview of why we are here tonight, discussing the Navigation Center and how the Nav Center fits into our vision for addressing homelessness in Anchorage. Homelessness is a bipartisan issue that requires a bipartisan response. In Anchorage, homelessness has been with us since before we became a municipality. We're here tonight because we recognize that the status quo can no longer be tolerated. We cannot let our fellow brothers and sisters suffer lives of misery, poverty, addiction, and starvation on our streets. At the core, we are here to help with the downtrodden, abused, neglected, and the suffering around us. We are here to help those experiencing homelessness get back on their feet, into housing, receive services and treatments, if needed, to once again live productive and healthy lives. I ask us all tonight to remember that goal and to not be callous or harsh as we talk about the ways to help the most vulnerable in our city. As Joe will illustrate here shortly, the Nav Center is just one spoke in the larger hub in the homelessness response system that we are building out. The Nav Center will provide temporary shelter and navigation support services for those experiencing homelessness. It will be a low-barrier, service-rich facility focused on temporary living facilities while navigators connect individuals experiencing homelessness to jobs, public benefits, health services, shelter, and housing. These types of facilities have been successful around the country in other cities grappling with homelessness. We remain committed to ending mass care by June 30th and returning the Sullivan Arena to its intended purpose as an event and sports facility. In October, the Assembly and the Mayor agreed that we needed to adopt a client community-focused approach consistent with the Anchored Home Plan to address homelessness and to wind down mass care. It was agreed by the Mayor and the Assembly that to end mass care operations, a combination of the following was needed. A single adult facility using a navigation center design, what we are talking about tonight. A special population facility utilizing a navigation center design, a medical convalescence facility, substance misuse treatment with housing, workforce and permanent supportive housing units, and surge capacity within the system. The navigation center is essential to the overarching plan that both the Mayor and the Assembly have agreed to. Additionally, the strategy agreed to is being supported by private partners like Rasmussen Foundation, Widener Apartment Homes, Chugach Alaska Corporation, Callista Corporation, Providence, and the Primera Blue Cross, Catholic Social Services, and the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness. This is an all-hands-on-deck effort to make a real difference in the lives of those experiencing homelessness. I thank you for being here tonight and for being very engaged citizens in our community. Joe?
Thank you, Alexis. Good evening. My name is Joe Gerace, and I'm the Director of the Anchorage Health Department. As the Mayor's Chief of Staff just described, a navigation center's primary role is to transition vulnerable and unhoused Alaskans into stable housing. Navigation centers are critical to connecting clients with services and housing assistance. They also provide homeless prevention services to the community at large. A wide range of on-site services will be available, including hygiene facilities, property storage, navigators providing case management, all intended to provide pathways to housing, healthcare, stability, income, and services. The end goal is to offer highly marginalized people a chance to safely re-engage, develop healthy relationships, and rebuild their lives. A navigation center is not the same as a homeless shelter. Traditional homeless shelters are high barrier, often limited to special populations. Families and children are frequently the primary focus of some shelters. A navigation center is a low barrier facility. There are no nightly lineups. There's no morning checkout times. It's staffed 24/7, and we welcome a broad range of configurations from single adults to couples. Whereas traditional shelter clients are often on a long road to stabilized housing navigation centers clients know their time and stay is limited. They are highly motivated to work with navigators towards permanent supportive housing. I hope that provides a little better picture of what the Navigation Center entails, and I now turn it over to Saxton Shear, our Director of M&O.
Hello, my name is Saxton Shear. I'm the Director of Maintenance and Operations. I know there were a lot of questions at the last listening session about the site selected for the NAV Center, the timeline for the building, the actual structure costs, who is involved and more. Tonight I want to try and answer some of the questions we heard previously. First, I need to correct the record by stating that our construction manager, Roger Hickel, Contracting, has solicited and committed to a company called Sprung Structures to manufacture the actual structure. The cost to manufacture the structure is estimated at $2.5 million. So folks understand it is common on projects such as this to have the designers work with the contractor to identify long lead items early in the design process. In a moment, we'll hear from Cheryl about the funding for that $2.5 million. Sprung Structures will begin the manufacturing process once funds have been released from Alaska Community Foundation, who is holding those funds from the Muni and private partners until then. On the slides behind me are the actual navigation centers from around the country that Sprung has manufactured. As you can see, those are not flimsy tents. Additionally, Sprung has buildings all over Alaska, including on the North Slope and Valdez. These are proven structures that can withstand harsh Arctic climates and snow loads. They can be designed to be very comfortable and offer modern amenities to the clients using them. The structure will go through review by the MOA engineers and experts to assess its structural integrity as it relates to snow, wind, and earthquakes. As you heard from Joe, what the interior of the NAV Center will look like is dependent on what consultants tell us is necessary for their clients. It will be a collaborative process with many entities to determine the interior and service offered. Regarding the site was selected due to its zoning and cost to develop. Navigation Center, which is most closely aligns with a transient center under code, are allowed in public land institutions, PLI, and B3 zoning districts. The proposed site is zoned PLI. Given the location, minimal work is necessary to prep the site prior to the structure being constructed. The structure is proposed to be located within an existing parking area, thus reducing the earthwork that is needed. There are also utilities on site that can serve the facilities as they are. Overall, we are at 35% design for the NAV Center. This means that we can refine estimates for actual construction. The working estimate for construction of the shelter is $9 million. Behind me is a draft graphic of the proposed site. This is a work in progress and could change based on stakeholder input, but we want to show the public what the NAV Center could potentially look like at this time. Design work is advancing thanks to the $800,000 appropriated from the Assembly in March. MOA planners and the engineers are reviewing the accuracy of the drawings received. We expect architectural and structural drawings next week, which will show site-specific details. Again, this is an ongoing process, and we are here tonight to answer your questions. Thanks again. Now, I'll kick it to Laquita.
Thank you, Saxton. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the conditional use permit process, which is required for the Navigation Center to be sited at the APD site. And so for those of you that aren't familiar, a conditional use permit process is established for a use that would normally be allowed in a location, but they want to take a closer look to make sure it's compatible with a specific site. And so we look at such things like the rules that are in Title 21, such as building height, setbacks, do we have enough parking? And then beyond that, we look at the bigger picture to see if this project will have impacts on the surrounding traffic, pedestrian connection, are there utilities to support the structure and other site-specific criteria. So there's lots of opportunity for us to continue to work together through the conditional use permit process, beginning with the community meeting that we'll have later in May. And as Saxton mentioned, we're working on design, so we'll be bringing forward additional information about the project and more specifics. And then when we submit our application to the municipality for review, you can submit comments through the planning department, and those become part of the staff packet that is reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission. And then finally, when we have our hearing before the Planning and Zoning Commission, you can come that evening and testify in person about the project. So there's lots of opportunities for us to work together and make sure that this project is a success. And with that, I will hand it off to Rochelle.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rochelle Alger, the municipality's purchasing director. I'm here this evening to help explain the request for proposal and bid process for the Navigation Center, otherwise known as an RFP. An RFP is a request for proposal that we put out to the public for them to bid on projects at the municipality. RFPs are very common and are required by code. This RFP we solicited for a construction manager, general contractor model to make the design construction phase smoother and more cost efficient. We do RFPs for just about everything. Any type of service or good that you can imagine, we solicit for input from the public for an RFP. RFPs entail a public process that follows rigid guidelines established under Title VII of the Municipal Code. For the construction, I'm sorry, I messed up my notes there for a second. Concerning the Navigation Center, we have issued and awarded an RFP to Roger Hickle Contracting for the construction management of the Navigation Center. This was a $50,000 contract. Roger Hickle, as the construction manager, solicited quotes for the structure. A company named Sprung Structures was selected to manufacture the structure. Currently, we don't have any other RFPs posted for the Navigation Center. As you've heard from Joe, Saxton, and Laquita, we are in the design, permitting, conditional use permit, and program evaluation stage. In the near future, an RFP will go out for the municipality to solicit bids from vendors who would operate the Navigation Center. Thank you all for coming, and with that, I hand this over to Cheryl.
Thank you, Rochelle. Good evening. My name is Cheryl Fresca, and I serve as the Director for the Office of Management and Budget. In addition to that role, I also am one of the members of the facilitated work group that has been collaboratively meeting and working with the Assembly to build out a comprehensive plan to address homelessness. As Saxton mentioned, my role this evening is to talk about the numbers, the budget-related information. In December, the Assembly and Mayor approved $6 million in municipal funds that were to be matched by private donations. These funds are being held at the Anchorage Community Foundation for 3 projects. $2 million is going toward the purchase of a facility to help those needing medical-related care. The Sockeye Inn at the corner of C Street and Fireweed was purchased by a group of private investors and will be operated by Catholic Social Services. This facility will open in June. Its full-year operating budget is estimated at $3.4 million, with a mix of revenue sources to support it, including proceeds from the Anchorage alcohol tax. $1.2 million is going toward the purchase of a workforce permanent supportive housing facility. Several options are currently being evaluated, and its purchase also will rely on substantial contributions from the private sector. Once in operation, federal housing-related programs are expected to cover the operating costs. $2.8 million of the initial $6 million was designated for adult shelter and navigation center, which is what we're obviously talking about tonight. Of this amount, so far, as Saxton mentioned, the Assembly has approved spending $800,000 towards the navigation center's design and initial work. The remaining $2 million will go toward the manufacturing of the navigation center structure. Up for consideration by the Assembly this week is a request for an additional $6.2 million for that construction. $4.9 million of this funding is from a 2-year-old appropriation that was to buy a building for homeless-related services that also was located on Tudor. That building did not proceed forward. And so the funding is still available to go towards this project. The other 1.3 million is coming from alcohol tax proceeds that the Assembly identified last year for homeless-related services, but those funds were unspent, and so they're being redesignated to this project. The target cost for construction, as Saxton mentioned, has been $9 million, and his crew is working hard to stay on track to meet that price tag. But the challenge, which I'm sure you can appreciate in this world circumstances that are contributing to escalation of costs and supply chain challenges. So as they proceed in that process, we'll fine tune the cost. The most recent estimate puts construction at almost $12 million, which includes $1 million for contingencies. But again, every effort is being made to contain costs and still get the job done. In terms of operating costs, those will ultimately be based on the programs and services that are to be planned based on input from folks such as you at events like this. Our working estimate is approximately $2.5 million for July through December 2022 operations. In terms of funding for the operations, the mayor is looking at several options, one of which is proposing the use of one-time federal ARPA funds. Tapping this funding would allow recurring alcohol tax proceeds to continue to be available for existing programs that are effectively placing and caring for homeless Alaskans. So with that, Alexis.
Perfect. All right, so I'm going to stand up and we're going to go to a question and answer, unless you want to speak really quick, Mr. Rivera. Perfect.
Thanks. So yeah, I think John and I wanted to share some things, and I'm not sure how really quick it'll be because we are 13 minutes ahead of schedule and we can easily fill that time. All right, so I want to step back and I think reiterate a little bit of what Alexis started with, and that's to give a little bit of a more global perspective before I dive into a resolution that is going to be before the body this week. And so I'm going to be answering the question, how the heck did we get here with this plan in the first place? So the answer to that question is two things. One, the Anchored Home Plan envisioned achieving functional zero by 2021 for youth and young adults, families, and veterans, and making concrete progress on achieving functional zero for single adults. And two, a gap analysis in 2020, which showed a 3,000 unit / bed gap in our community, most of which is in housing, with about 450 of that total 3,000 being shelter. So that's why plans have been created since 2020 that had focused on a similar array of services and facilities. So the plan that we're working from has 5 planks in it. First is complex care shelter. The second is special populations housing. Third is permanent supportive housing and workforce housing. Fourth is substance misuse treatment and housing. And fifth is navigation center and low barrier shelter. So of those 5 planks, the Assembly has approved funding for 4 of them. We approved funding for the capital stack and operational dollars at the complex care facility at the Sockeye. We approved funding for the capital stack dollars for the permanent supportive housing and workforce housing facility at a TBD location. We approved funding for design dollars to help a 68-bed facility run by the Salvation Army get back online. And we approved funding for design and manufacture dollars for the Navigation Center. So that gets us to the next request in the line, which other folks have talked about, the construction dollars for the Navigation Center. My job here is to present a resolution that's going to be laid on the table. I already think it's Tuesday, laid on the table tomorrow, and voted on at a special meeting later this week, likely Thursday. So I'm not sure, and I'm going to look to our folks organizing. Do we have printed copies of said resolution? No? Okay. Well, hopefully we'll be able to get you printed copies of said resolution, but I'm just going to go ahead and read the relevant parts. So first is this resolution defines a navigation center, and I've heard that very loud and clear from folks. What the heck is a navigation center? So a navigation center, the municipality of Anchorage defines a navigation center as a housing first, low barrier, service enriched environment focused on moving individuals experiencing homelessness into permanent housing that provides temporary living facilities, while case managers connect individuals experiencing homelessness to income, public benefits, health services, shelter, and housing. So that's a lot of stuff. The navigation center, by definition, does a lot of different things. So housing first, we've been talking about housing first in this community for a long time. I'm just going to read a couple of the whereas statements in here that helps to, I think, better hone in and define that. So the proposed navigation center will follow a housing first approach that prioritizes permanent housing to people experiencing homelessness, thus ending their homelessness and serving as a platform from which they can pursue personal goals and improve their quality of life. Second, whereas in here that talks about housing first, the commitment to housing first is based on the principle that client choice is valuable in housing selection and supportive service participation, and that exercising that choice is likely to make a client more successful in remaining housed and improving their life. So next is a whereas that I think is really key for understanding the low barrier shelter and component of this. So the municipality will employ the 5 keys of effective emergency sheltering at the emergency shelter co-located with the proposed navigation center. 1, housing first approach. 2, safe and appropriate diversion. 3, immediate and low barrier access. 4, housing focused rapid exit. And 5, data-driven performance measurement. And the municipality will continue to work with a variety of subject matter experts in designing, implementing, and supporting the programs, operations, and services at the navigation center. Then the resolution, it's a little bit of a lengthy one, it's 3 pages, goes into a variety of commitments. I'm just going to summarize them quickly. The first commitment is the municipality commits to achieving the goal of functional zero, which, as I spoke to earlier, is a population-based goal. Second is the municipality commits to limiting the duration of the proposed navigation center to focus our vision and our goal on that achievement of functional zero. And then the third is the municipality commits to prioritizing spending one-time funds on the procurement, construction, and operation of the proposed navigation center, and prioritize recurring funding on supporting the existing effective emergency shelter prevention and housing programs in Anchorage. So what that whereas gets to is really the need to make sure that we build out this new program, but also support our existing programs, and we're not leaving our existing programs behind. Briefly to close, I am going to go through the 5 sections in this whereas, which I think are the critical pieces, because those are the concrete commitments that we're going to be making. So section 1, the municipality commits to achieving the goals of housing first and functional zero within 2 years from the date construction is complete and the navigation center is fully operational. Section 2, the municipality commits to developing a program for low barrier shelter and for a navigation center utilizing both local and national subject matter experts, which 1, utilizes housing first principles, the 5 keys to effective low barrier shelter, which I read earlier, and meets the adopted definition of what constitutes a navigation center, which I also read earlier. 2, join the navigation center community of practice. And so for folks who don't know what that means, there's a community of practice that is stood up by the coalition, to the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness and other individuals that basically they meet on a regular basis to come up with the operational programming for these facilities. So just very recently, they came up with the operational programming for the Sockeye Inn, which is going to be the complex care facility. They're actually in the process right now of coming up with the organizational programming for the 3rd Avenue Navigation Center, which is going to be at the old Beans Cafe building. They're also coming up with operational programming for a low barrier facility. So there's a lot of work that community of practice is doing, and so this commits us to joining that community of practice. 3, identify a dedicated point person within the administration to participate and bring additional MOA employees to participate as appropriate and requested. And 4, the program developed by this work group will be used to evaluate responses to any requests for proposals for operators of the low barrier shelter and navigation center at this location. Section 3, the municipality commits to ending operations of the navigation center once the following has been achieved, and it's a sort of a 1 or 2. First is basically meeting functional zero. So at any point in time, the number of people experiencing sheltered or unsheltered homelessness will be no greater than the current monthly housing placement rate for people experiencing homelessness. And then 2, the second possible lever that will shut down ending operations of the navigation center is where the total number of people experiencing sheltered and unsheltered homelessness in the community is less than 150. The 4th section in the resolution, the navigation center is considered an emergency shelter location, and use of emergency surge capacity will be activated and deactivated following requirements in Anchorage Municipal Code Chapter 16.120, Emergency Shelter Plan for Homeless Persons. And then 5th, the municipality calls upon all community partners to work together in achieving these community goals. So it's a pretty, in my opinion, it's a pretty heavy resolution that has a lot of, I think, really important commitments. And for me, the biggest concern that I had about this plank is that it be a true navigation center with a co-located low barrier shelter. And this resolution, which was negotiated in good faith by all the parties, it gets me to a place where I can honestly and with full integrity say that this will be a true navigation center if we do the work and meet these commitments. And you better believe I'm going to make sure we do. Thanks.
Well, thanks, Felix. You did a good job there on that. I just want to emphasize that when we talk about the navigation center, it is one component of a system. And, we have in the history of Anchorage not really participated, city government has not participated in serving the homeless. That's been something by nonprofits and faith-based groups. And we have not done much. About 3 years ago, we put $400,000 or so to Catholic Social Services. I think we did almost $2 million for Home for Good program, but that was about it. And Mayor Bronson, thank you, sir, came in and prioritized this. He says, it's not working. We all know it wasn't working. And said, we're going to get involved and we're going to fix this. And what you see here is 5 different programs, facilities to supplement what we've had from the other groups for so many years to really start making it so it works. It's not, and we don't look at this navigation center as a component of a system. So it's not, shouldn't really be looked at as one piece, an independent piece. None of them are independent. The operation at the sockeye, the permanent supportive housing and workforce housing, that's a component. These all work together to augment the current system. So think about that as you view this navigation center. We've set up things to navigate to, and we also already have some. We have Covenant House, things that Salvation Army and other groups that are things that we will navigate to. So this is one part of a, very important to think of as one part of a system. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Felix and John. So we are going to kick off question and answer. And Laquita.
Great, thank you. So just a couple things before we start into our list of speakers is just the rules of engagement. So if everyone can be kind to one another, limit your outburst. You're just taking away from your neighbor's time to speak if you do that. And then we are asking people to limit their comments to about 3 minutes. If you do have questions, you can ask them in that time and we will try to answer them as we can, but it will be part of your 3 minutes. We do ask that you sign up to be heard out in the lobby. So if you're not on the list and you want to speak, please make sure you see the ladies out in front. If you're not comfortable speaking in public, we do have comment forms in the back of the room that you can fill out and leave with us this evening. We also have cards that you can take with you that have a QR code for an online survey as well. So lots of opportunities for you to provide your input. With that, I will start through the speakers. Speaker number 1, Sandra.
Hi, my name is Sandra Myrop, M-I-E-R-O-P, and I live at 9630 Burning Bush Drive in Anchorage. I'm not opposed to the navigation center. I'm opposed to the place of the navigation center. I have two main concerns, issues regarding the navigation center, wildfires and pedestrian traffic safety. I understand that AFD has incident reports regarding the fires from campers around the Sullivan Arena. I have not been able to get those statistics. The Assembly should be able to get them easily, and I hope that they do before they vote tomorrow. Placing a navigation center at the edge of the Chugach Forest is a wildfire disaster or many disasters waiting to happen. I believe that it's a matter of when and not if, when this navigation center opens and campfires are used by homeless campers that really don't want to overnight in the center. A wildfire will move rapidly up the Anchorage hillside, causing a massive amount of destruction. Remember the wildfire caused by a camper just a couple of years ago in the same area as this proposed homeless navigation center? I remember because I evacuated my mom, who suffers from dementia and lives with me. This is real. And vis-a-vis the fire department, I live in a lives-only area in the event of a fire. So that means that my property is subject to crispy critter in the event of wildfire, right? Friday evening, as I was driving down Tudor, I saw 5 sets of campers sleeping behind the business edging property at the University Baptist Church at Wright and Tudor. Isn't the Sullivan Arena Mass Care Homeless Shelter still open? I'm not an expert, but for some reason, the mass shelter concept does not seem like a good fit for many homeless people. I also tried to get incident reports from the Anchorage DOT regarding pedestrian vehicle accidents between Lake Otis and Piper, but time wasn't on my side before the listening session this evening. Again, the Assembly should easily get those statistics. Placing a mass shelter in one of the busiest streets in Alaska is something that I just cannot even get my head around. Also, it's a matter of time before there will be pedestrian vehicle incidents and deaths. And now that the Elmore extension is being considered, this center will potentially be in 2 of the busiest roadways in Alaska, making a perfect storm more perfect in the worst possible way. I also did not think making a shelter at the old Alaska Club property at Tudor and Old Suter was a sharp idea because so many pedestrians and fast-moving traffic do not mix well. Thanks for being open to different ideas.
Thank you much for testifying. I'm actually going to give you a card and then we'll connect after tomorrow and I'll get you some of those facts, okay? All right, Laquita, I'm sorry.
Speaker number 2, Paul.
Hi, I'm Paul Stang, the UACC Board. In June 2021, the administration appeared to try to circumvent MUNI competitive bid procurement rules, saying homelessness is an emergency in Anchorage. There was no homeless emergency. Homeless is a chronic issue. The administration seemed to be using the term emergency to clear the way for a fast sole source purchase of a big sprung structure tent. In July, Mayor Bronson requested quick approval for $8 million from the Assembly to buy the tent and have it fully operating by October 2021. Subsequently, a MUNI contractor found that the sprung structure design would fail wind load, snow load, and seismic specs. Redesign would be expensive and time consuming. Fast forward to the present. The mayor set June 30th as a deadline, however unrealistic, to have a navigation center built and fully operational. The MUNI issued an RFP and somehow, magically, Sprung Structure won the contract, hands down, as the only bidder who could meet the artificial deadline, so effectively a sole source. Also, the administration seems to be ignoring and bypassing its own code that requires lengthy public facility site selection and conditional use permit processes before obtaining a building permit. Their approach, calling the facility temporary without specifying its use, avoids these requirements. But they are also calling it a permanent homeless facility, which seems blatantly contrary to the letter and spirit of the law. The public never gets any substantive details for timely review. The attached position paper, which I'll give you, written by our UACC president, Tyler Robinson, explains the issue succinctly. It was unanimously adopted by the UAC and subsequently published last Tuesday as an ADN commentary. Tyler has extensive firsthand experience on these matters, including 7 years on the Anchorage P&Z Commission, 3 as chairman. Stephen Callahan, who's also here tonight, also is a permitting expert on our board. He confirmed how problematic the Muni's approach is at your first listening session on April 13th. I have 3 requests. We request Adam Trombley, who's conveniently here, meet his commitment to Assemblyman Rivera, who's conveniently here, to provide examples of other Muni-approved projects that use this above shortcut piggyback approach. We request the Muni reassess, revise, and make public its permit processes before any other related contracts are awarded. Finally, I'll give you a dozen statements that UACC has made since June. We've never heard responses from the administration. We'd like a substantive response. When can we expect to get answers to these questions?
Thank you so much for your testimony. I'm actually going to turn the mic over to Adam Trombley and then to Saxton Shear.
I appreciate you bringing that up. I know there's been a lot of confusion regarding public facility site selections, conditional use permits. Code can be very complicated. And what's important to understand when you look at municipal code is you can never just take one section of it and assume that that's gospel. You have to understand what's above it and what's below it. You have to read it in context. And then a public site selection, the public facility site selection process is not required on a facility that has a conditional use permit. That is laid out in code. In regards to your other questions, I'll turn it over to Saxton.
Hello. Actually, yesterday we received a lot of relevant questions, and Rochelle the purchasing department, myself came in on Sunday to provide. Ironically, this is one of, and if you don't mind my reading my notes, this was one of those questions. And I hate to read off the script, but I captured this. And what I did is I harvested this from my conversations with engineers and the MOA engineering departments from planning and development. And I have the math formula for how they meet structural, seismic, and all that. But I'll read the explanation that differs or defines between temporary and permanent. And just to be clear, we are not bypassing city code. The structure will be permanent as a permanent structure and go through the same review process as of any other permanent building. The design team, along with Sprung, have to provide the necessary submittals to MOA as part of the building permit process. And that structure needs to meet building code requirement and Title 21 requirements. One of those requirements for a fabric structure to be considered a permanent structure is to provide a permanent foundation, which is currently the design. That includes slab on grade underground utilities. You had another question.
The last question is, when I give you these, we'd like responses to every specific point we make. I have one for you, for Saxton, and I have one for the Dell.
And I don't know if this answers your question completely, but the previous effort for this project factored I believe, 100,000 square foot building. The square footage, the occupancy hadn't been agreed upon. And so that might have played a factor in with the engineering to meet the seismic and snow load. The span of a facility that massive would have to be structurally sound. This is significantly smaller, as I understand. I wasn't part of the previous effort, but we're looking at 29,700 square feet. And I've seen the engineering behind it as our team has approached 35% design, and we've been reassured that it's going to meet the requirement. We're still due to receive the structural and architectural drawings, but we have mechanical and electrical, and we have put the preliminary plans, that what they call a deferred submittal in front of development services. So the MOA side is also already checking the manufacturer drawings.
And when will the public get to see all these things that we?
I believe we just activated the website where we're going to start dropping documents in and be able to publish everything as we go through. I know at the end of this week, our comments are due for electrical and mechanical reviews from all the design team and the owner's side, which is development services. So we'll publish that.
And all the training of people and all the things that will occur will be detailed in detail.
I can't speak to the training part. That's an operational
Hiring,
thing.
et cetera.
Definitely. I think that's incidental, obviously, once it comes online. We're just working on those long lead items first.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I get speaker number 3, Jason?
Good evening. The last stop on Carla. I recently stumbled across this independent documentary, we'll call it, of what's been going on for years on 3rd Avenue. In that, as we all know, everything that has been going on at the Sullivan Arena was documented in this as well. I feel for those from 3rd Avenue and the years that they've had to spend under this. And I appreciate everyone's work that's sitting up here. And I know you've worked hard, but like many of us on the east side, we're going to ask that you work even harder. Because although you've done a lot, I do agree that you've come out with a great plan, right? And you have showed us tonight. I greatly appreciate that, as well as everybody here and everybody who's not here. However, the 200 and 130 plus surge capacity isn't really truly leading us out of mass care. The other parts I do agree with. They are a great work and plan to do that. However, the 200 plus 130, as of yesterday, the total capacity was 364 in the Sullivan Arena. I've been watching that consistently, and averaging, it's about 364. So when we look at that and we look at the Pine Street Inn and their total of 670 beds, those are spread out emergent shelters, and they have a men's shelter that is 365, a women's inn that's 120, a struggling substance use disorder, legal, financial, and mental health that's also 120 men's bed, and a sober living facility that's a 65 bed. From those 2 men's shelters, most of those individuals transfer into that sober living facility. So as you can see, those that are the most struggling with substance use, legal, financial, and mental health is a smaller bed capacity. When we're looking at that 365, we're basically taking the entire population of the Sullivan Arena. I ask again that you really consider what you're doing and you break this up one more time. We know we have a property that's 100 beds. We know where that's at. That's the Golden Lion. I'm going to keep kicking that can until it's all the way down the road, and you guys listen that is available. And if that's not, for whatever reason that is, share that with us and find a different location, because splitting this up is where we need to be. I work with homeless men aged 26 to about 60. And of those, everyone has said, I will not go to the Sullivan Arena for various reasons, for all the troubles, right? When you get 200 men into a room, we all know, I was in the military, there's theft, there's bullying, the list can go on of what I could say goes under those roofs. You need to split these individuals up. We all know they have backgrounds that they're not proud of, some of them, and some of them continue to do those trends. Putting them all under one roof is not where we need to be. I agree with low barrier and we need to help everyone, but that is not right. We need to work harder. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I'm actually going to hand the mic over to Felix.
Thanks, Jason, for that. So I want to address those comments in 2 ways. First, want to mention a lot of the great work that the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness, along with our HUD disaster relief technical assistance partners, are doing right now. So they have an ambitious goal of housing 10 individuals a day from now through the end of June. And though that work isn't part of the facilitated process, it's always been seen by all of the parties as a parallel path to the facilitated process, because we know that in the end, and the coalition is going to love me repeating this, in the end, the solution to homelessness is housing. And so that work, the coalition, and speaking for myself personally, I feel strongly that that work is going to reduce that total number that you were talking about, the 360 odd individuals who are currently staying in the Sullivan Arena, reduce that number. So by the time June 30 comes around, we're no longer going to be looking at 330 individuals needing to go to the low barrier shelter that's co-located with the navigation center or any of the other facilities we have in town. Hopefully we're talking about a much smaller number. And in fact, at a work session this last Friday, and I hope I'm getting this right as I'm repeating this, the coalition pretty much said that their work is so successful right now that they can't imagine going over 200 sort of day one at the navigation center and the low barrier shelter at this facility. So there's a lot of work that's going on right now, both at this table and outside of this table, which is amazing, that we really hope to reduce those numbers. And then honestly, within 2 years, let's close this navigation center down because it's done what we've wanted it to do.
Can I follow on a question with that, if you don't mind? Is that all right?
Sure.
One, thank you for that. What if we don't succeed? I hate to play the what if game, but what if we don't succeed? And on top of that, with the majority of these individuals, because of their backgrounds, that is the main purpose why they struggle to get employment and they struggle to get housing. They need wraparound services that follow up with them. If they don't have that type of support, that is something that we have to bear burden to based on their decisions or some not their decisions that we have to accept. And if we offer that to them, right, that is going to make the true difference of whether we end up in the same scenario that we've been in since 1981 with George Sullivan as our mayor, who started doing things, but doing just a little, and how much we will tolerate in public, right? How much little bit we will give to our struggling individuals in this town. So those are two things to really consider here, right? We're talking about the housing, the workforce, but there's individuals out there that can't get a job because of the things that they've done, right? They can't get housing. So I hope that that's in the equation here as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I get speaker number 4, Sandy?
Hi, my name is Sandy. I just want to say that I am against the location. It's like the lady said earlier, it's a disaster waiting to happen. And I don't think there's a lot of people up there that are really know who the homeless is, because as we speak, there are homeless people flying into Alaska. So we're not just, and there's open borders. Those people are homeless too. Alaska is a #1 destination, and a lot of them got hotels and room and board for 2 years. The Sullivan Arena, if the Sullivan Arena is an example of what you guys are doing, it's a very poor example. And so far I haven't heard how you are going to make improvements. And I don't understand why 2 years ago, why we weren't having this discussion once the Sullivan Arena was open. Poor planning. The cost would have been way cheaper. And I guess now it's up to the taxpayer to take care of the homeless, is what you're saying. Because once the funds run out, somebody has to pay for it. Also, the maintenance cost on all these buildings and the labor costs. So far, we have a big bill from the Sullivan Arena unpaid for. Is that correct? A huge bill who's paying the bill for the Sullivan Arena? It's still unpaid for, correct? Or the taxpayer is, until it gets worked out with the government? No, thank you for that question. You're right, as a kind of a loan, if you will, taxpayer dollars are being used as they have for the last 2 years. But they are being submitted to FEMA, the federal government, for reimbursement. And so we've received about 30 million in reimbursement so far, but we have about another 40 million that is in process.
Well, that's what I say about poor planning. Number one, you were, the way it was presented to the public, the CARES funds were paying for this, but the public has not been able to use Sullivan Arena. And what I'm saying is, why wasn't this discussion started 2 years ago? We should have been here 2 years ago, not 2 years later. So you need to, poor planning, you need to know who your homeless people are. And
Thanks so much.
thank you.
Speaker number 5, Bev.
First, I'd like to thank everyone for all your countless hours working on this issue and persevering through it. It's not an easy task, and it's a problem that's as paramount as fixing the port, because like the port, our quality of life hangs on it. One of the things I see in the newspaper as I'm reading letters to the editor about the homeless issue is that people want these people not to be in their neighborhoods. They're destroying their quality of life in the neighborhood and in the parks. I applaud the idea of the small residential housing facilities for targeted populations, but I think one of the primary supports would be trained counselors being on staff there, security being on staff there, so that the behaviors exhibited by the folks who are there, they are understood by the trained counselors. They don't take it personally. They're not overreacting. They understand this is because of this person's identified PTSD or drug or alcohol use or whatever kind of mental illness they're experiencing, so they know how to de-escalate the situation appropriately. And so the people continually come up against that kind of reception and said, we just want to get rid of you. We don't want people to see you in the neighborhood. I think the navigation ideas with wraparound services, showers, laundry, food, all these facilities is great. But again, it's a large warehousing situation if you're going to have a 300-bed facility. Rather, I think you should put small ones north, south, east, and west, where this targeted population has a closer service center to come to. And so they can come there, and you can have, temporary bedding for 50 or 60 people if that's what you need. But it would get the homeless population out of the neighborhood. They would have a place to go to the bathroom. They would have a place to go for water. They would have a counselor to talk to. They could go take a shower if they wanted to. They could wash the clothes. They could feel like they could sit somewhere during the day and not have to keep shuffling around all day. And I think as these targeted populations live in these facilities, they would gain a sense of, this is a place I come to every day. I have an address to put in my job application. I have a place to come home to and take care of. These small residential facilities should have the participants do, 2 hours of housekeeping, go out and sweep the sidewalk, let them start taking care of where they live. Again, developing their sense of place and pride. Also, the chronic homeless will need people to give them support in personal hygiene, how to take care of themselves. They have been so far removed from participating in normal life for years. They need to know how to do that. They need to know how to learn how to ride the bus. Bus passes should be given to the people who have job applications or have jobs, so they are supported to go to, there's more.
Thank you for your comments. I'm going to hand the mic over to Adam Trombley and then to Mr. Rivera.
Yeah, you've clearly thought this out, and I really do appreciate it. Your ideas are extremely valid. Some of the challenges that we run into, when we talk about having multiple locations throughout the city, you said north, south, east, west, is in code we have zoning requirements, and for shelters, transient homeless shelters is what they're called in our tables. And I won't get too much into the weeds of municipal code, is that there's only certain locations we're able to to have, there's only certain zoning areas that we're able to have these locations.
So could that be a commercial or business area?
Yes, ma'am, it's either B3
Okay,
or
because
PLI.
we have so much empty commercial and retail space in this town. You could easily go into like an old restaurant. They've got kitchens, they've got bathrooms, retrofit plumbing. I mean, there's so much that can be done with the space that we have. And the other thing, besides money for, trained counselors and security, we need transportation, little minibuses to get people. They come into the temporary navigation center, the small place, they go in, they get cleaned up, they talk to someone, they feel a little comfortable, and you take them to the housing that's appropriate for them right then. Or if they don't know or not, and they need more time, they could spend the night there if you have 30 or 50 beds, for someone. But it's getting people off of the streets. They have a place. I mean, these centers could turn into warming centers in the winter. And again, be staffed by trained people so that those people who are still in the street, they'll go there to get warm.
Yes, ma'am.
So
Yes,
anyway.
ma'am.
Anyway, I just appreciate all you're doing. It's not an easy issue, but I think smaller is always better.
No, again, I want to emphasize wonderful ideas. We're bound by what the law says in locations that we can have, and those are only in PLI, public lands institutions, and B3 zoning districts. So the idea that there's a restaurant or retail location, wonderful idea, absolutely wonderful idea. But our law doesn't allow it unless that changes, and there's a long involved process involved in that. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. And then Felix, you have something?
Just ask you to consider this idea of smaller ones throughout town. So the east side has one, the west side, the north side, south side. They all have a spot.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for that, Beth. And, I think a lot of what you described, as I understand it, a lot of those discussions of what happens when you step into the door, what happens when you need something in the navigation center or in the low barrier shelter, and all of these moving pieces are things that the community of practice, that they will walk through all of these pieces to make sure that as best as we can, the needs and wants of the individuals who use this facility are being met. And I just want to sort of reiterate this navigation center. It's hard to put sort of a time stamp of sort of the average length of stay, because that's not necessarily how these facilities work. You meet people where they are, and for some individuals, it's going to be a lot more work before they can get into housing. But the point of this, though, is to get people in and then to get people out into housing and wraparound supportive services. So, we certainly don't want this to become, I think the word that you used was a warehouse facility. That would be, I think, a failure if that's what this facility turns into. And then we don't have the map that I was hoping for, but I'm gonna hope to get a map here soon that shows you of all of the 4 different facilities that we're looking at right now, sort of where they are around town, so that you can really truly get a sense of the distribution of these facilities, because I think that was really intentional from the facilitator process before I joined, which, by the way, I joined in February, and this whole thing really started in July of last year. But that was one of the things Mr. Weddleton, who's an old timer in the group, been there since July, why don't you speak to it about that?
Oh, yeah, thanks. So when we started out, we did look very broadly for different locations. We looked at over 70 locations, and that started with what the previous administration, Berkowitz administration, had looked at, some under the Quinn Davidson administration, and then so we looked at those, and then a whole new list that we made up. And then we also went and just sent out a request for information to all realtors and said, you guys got any idea we need buildings or locations like this? And we evaluated these, based on certain criteria. Is it near, buses and different services and so on? And, how is it big enough? And, all the variety of criteria. And narrowed it down ultimately to 8 different sites that were possible. And this location for this use rose to the top for many reasons. I mean, it certainly has, people say it should be near a grocery store. That would be really nice. It's not critical because they'll be fed. But it is near, bus station, It is near, medical if that's needed. I expect there would be some medical care within the facility as well. But this one rose to the top consistently as a good location for this. And I think the woman who spoke did a wonderful job describing a navigation center and all the different services described. That is exactly what would be at a navigation center. And should they be a series of 20, 30, 40, or 50 sizes? The 200 is not a large shelter. The success of a shelter, a 50-person shelter could be a disaster, absolute disaster for a neighborhood if the services aren't there. A 200-person shelter is not big if the services are there. Someone mentioned Pine Street Inn. It's over 650 people at Pine Street Inn. You do not know that's a shelter when you are standing outside its door because it's very well run. And they have services there. They have an incredible navigation center within walking distance. So the size is a function of the impact on the neighborhood is a function of the services. 200 is not a large shelter. Thanks.
Speaker number 6, Brian.
My name is Brian Silva. I live in the Campbell Park Community Council area where the Navigation Center is planned to be placed. A number of years ago, I worked for the state of Utah and was involved in an analysis of a state program there they called public inebriate. It was meant to be an alternative to incarceration, and the idea was that they'd provide counseling and housing for public inebriates and break the cycle of recidivism. After about 2 years, we did an analysis of that and found that there was no change in the behavior of the people who were targeted. They simply saw it as 3 hots and a cot, even though there was expensive counseling provided and lots of facilities spread over the state. I was shocked when I heard about this planned navigation center, the size of it, and the sort of the presumptuousness of it. I think the plan was based on sort of wishful thinking and naivety. You have to pick your population very carefully from amongst the homeless if you want to have success with treatment and counseling and job placement. The target population, I think according to the editorials in the Anchorage Daily News, is conceived to be public inebriates, and they are very resistant to the kinds of counseling that was provided in Utah and seems to be offered here. If you, when you talk about homeless, there's a large number of groups involved. I mean, you have families with children, you have people who are temporarily out of work, you have people in transition, as well as people who are chronically mentally ill, addicted to substances, a great many types of people. And I think you can have success with what seems to be planned if you pick your population. But if you put out a wide net and bring in those who are most obvious, the ones that people complain about, you're going to find you're not going to change them very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments.
Speaker number 7, Steve.
Hi, my name is Steve Offrecht, and I just wanted to note, hi Cheryl, I just wanted to note that this meeting tonight is taking place in the Wilda Marsden Auditorium. And she was the chair of the library board when this building was planned and funded and built And she did a lot of other things for this municipality of Anchorage that has improved our lives. And she and her fellow Republican activist, Arla Sturgielewski, both have passed away in the last couple of weeks. And I think we should just take a moment to thank both of them for their work, and particularly Wilda for this building that we're in and her dedication to a world-class library. Thank you.
Speaker number 8, Kathy.
Thank you. My name is Kathy Beathard. I live in the South Anchorage area, and I'd like to thank all of you for your service, the time and dedication that you've taken to research and come up with some, what I think are really viable solutions to our homeless problem. And I'd like to thank the last gentleman for bringing something so positive to this meeting. I loved what he had to say, so thank you very much. We've been working on a solution for the homeless issue in Anchorage for eons, it seems like. And to me, the solution that's before us tonight and will be for the assembly tomorrow is the most viable solution that I've heard to date. It handles all facets of the homeless situation, or attempts to do that in any way. The navigation center, where it's located, is close to medical facilities, close to the police force, close to the bus service, is in a location that is surrounded by woods, so it's not visible to the public as they drive by. And the facilities that you're talking about putting in the navigation center, to Bev's point, you really need to look to make sure you've got all those counselors that are well-trained and can actually take care of the population. But that is planned, and I think it is going to happen. I would urge everyone to pass this resolution as it's being presented now. And I was hoping that it was going to be presented tomorrow during the assembly meeting, but it sounds like it's not going to be voted on until Thursday. Is that a correct assumption at this point? Thank you. I'm also involved in some of the hockey events that go around town and with some of the teams. And I have to say that for those teams that are going to rely on playing at the Sullivan Arena, for the people that want to see events happen at the Sullivan Arena here to add liveliness to the city of Anchorage, which is something we really need right now, positive type of vibes in this community. We need to get that Sullivan back to what its proposed uses are. There are a number of repairs and improvements that have to be made to that facility. So we have to move quickly in that regard to get those things moving forward so that we can utilize the facility by next season. Otherwise, we have to make plans to move elsewhere. Anyway, I urge you to vote for it. And I, again, thank you for your service and time and the amount of time that you spent on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Before I call the next speaker, I did want to mention there are copies of the resolution back on the back table in the back of the room there for those that would like to get a copy. Speaker number 9, Alice.
Hello, my name's Alice Snapp. I'm a lifelong resident of Anchorage, born and raised here and love it. I am a passionate recreational skier, biker, tennis player, active person, and raised my family in East Anchorage on Wesleyan Drive, backing up to the Chester Creek Bike Trail. We have a great system of parks. We have phenomenal opportunities. I think a lot of us live here because of those opportunities. I'm concerned about the site location. I'm in support of the navigation center. I think it sounds great. I do wish it wasn't quite so big for the Occupancy, realistically, I wish it would, but it's not going to solve our problem with the homeless. A lot of the homeless population, I believe, will not go to any kind of big shelter. And my experiences with the camps, I run, ski, bike daily on the bike trails behind my house, through the university area, up through the tour trail, and I don't go down near the Sullivan anymore on my own because I don't feel safe. And I would rather face a bear or a moose than an inebriated homeless population on the trail. And I know that sounds terrible, but it's my reality. And I really feel that we expressed these concerns whenever the first time we had this session. And I don't feel like you heard us say that we were concerned about the site location. I know you looked at other site locations, but if you're getting a conditional use permit anyway, why not investigate, other areas like where Clitheroe is, that isn't near residential. I live within half a mile of this proposed shelter. The crossing is Tudor Crossing. In the winter, that's groomed for ski trails. The trash of the homeless camps, and I applaud this administration, has done a really good job of cleaning up camps as reported. Parks and Rec has done a really good job, or whoever's cleaning them up is good about it, but they pop up immediately all over. And it's frustrating. I know you're doing the best you can, but I really think this site location, it's going to impact my life. And I think it'll impact a lot of people that they live where they live because of recreational opportunities. And one other thing I was going to ask, can I ask really quick? What do you mean by low barrier?
Thank you. That question comes up regularly.
Yeah.
That has yet to be decided, but I don't want you to think low barrier means no barrier. So we absolutely expect to have some kind of standards around this facility, but I can't answer that yet because it's a community answer from our community partners.
Is the Sullivan Arena low barrier? Because if it is, it means we're going to have the population on the trails.
Yeah, so I'm happy to provide a response to that. So a low barrier shelter is one where folks are welcome to come in as they are, right? And the balance with the low barrier shelter is where you balance where people are coming in as they are and the security and other contingencies that need to be in place, and how you balance that. That is the trick that makes a low barrier shelter work. And again, I'm going to repeat, the community of practice, they are really honed in and focused on really trying to build that balance, because I don't think anyone feels like Brother Francis Shelter was a successful low barrier shelter. And, we have heard time and again, right, the issues with Brother Francis Shelter. So, we want to build this so that we don't repeat those same mistakes of the past, and building this community of practice, I think, is gonna at least put us in a step forward, so that when we do a low barrier shelter at this location at Tudor and Elmore, if everything pans out, then we will have learned those lessons, and we will have hopefully built a balance of making sure we're meeting people where they are and providing that security for the clients and the neighbors. If
they can come and go at will, which was what I was kind of thinking low barrier meant to me, if they're coming and going at will, the camps are going to be in the area more so than they already are. And that's just going to be a constant problem with wildfires and trash and so on. Thank you.
Thanks. I just want to Hi, Alice. Thanks. When we looked at different sites, we did look at Clitheroe, which I remind you is also right next to a very important trail. We have such an incredible trail system in Anchorage. About every location is near some kind of trail. Clitheroe is a problem because there's nothing else out there. No buses, no close to school. I mean, it is really a challenged area in regards to the functioning navigation center. But, this is not a place where we will store people. This is a place where they would come in. This is the entry point to a much larger system. This is part of a system. And if we don't have an entry point, then it really makes it challenging. The other points lose that benefit. We were building more housing in the system. So
why can't the entry point be someplace not near residential? I mean, part of the system should be building the infrastructure, the van or bus, do a people mover route, except, I mean, to me, if you're gonna be distributing them anyway between these smaller, not shelters, whatever you want to call them, why can't the entry point be somewhere that doesn't impact neighborhoods? Just
Speaker number 10, Ron.
Good evening. I spoke the last time. I'm more than happy to give up this time to someone who would like to take my 3 minutes. Anybody? Good, then you'll have to suffer through this. Good evening, I'm Ronald Leva. No one has attended more homeless meetings and been affected by alleged homeless issues like inebriates shelters. I'd like the name changed from homeless to the unhoused. We're trying to house the unhoused. Homeless carries a connotation of negativity. So let's kind of rewrite that a little bit. Now, I've been through every administration from George Sullivan, Maestrom, Wirch, Begich, Berkowitz, all of them. No administration has been more responsible to this issue than this administration. It's surprising. And last time we had a listening session, there was complaints he wasn't here. Believe me, he is here. He has ears here. He's watching it. He has eyes everywhere. And he truly does listen and act. Mr. Whittleton, we're losing someone very valuable who knows that a large facility, no matter where it's put, can be run properly. Catholic Charities of Southern Nevada has one of the best, and it's amazing. It's on 14 acres, but the status is be proud of being a NIMBY, because what's coming you will never prepare for. And I would suggest a tax exemption area to every property owner within 5,000 feet of any homeless facility, because they are not geared up to do what it'll take to be necessary for what you work for, and you want to protect your families. Be proud of that. Now, I commended Mr. Peterson. It was amazing. We almost went to blows on the Red Wolf Inn. But if you want a real good consultant, Tim Potter's retired, Hillary Morgan's here, and they'll give you the history on this. But that location, a little bit spooky. Back where we're at, we have a campground, you have my 3 acres, and the MLNP was going to vacate that whole block. That would have been a multi-purpose campus. Germany, 3 polluted rivers. Here's what I'd ask. I want to see where you spent all the money, down to the wages of the homeless coordinator that was at 196.7, close to that range for almost 4.5 years. That's $1 million. Where did the rest of the money go? And show me the rate of return on money spent. silence, because the money was abused, misspent, and it's terrible to use the same partners who appear and say, oh, we served 1 million meals and we have the largest homeless shelter in the nation. That's not something to be proud of. That you should be ashamed of that and solve that. But they gave them, the same partners, carte blanche. That's what I'd like to see. And continue your efforts. It would be better to return the facility back to where it was, and you won't ruin these people's quality of life. Any questions for me? I'll send you a bill, because Mr. Potter's $100,000 probably for 3 months. Money well spent.
Thank you, Rob. Can I get speaker number 11, Andrew?
My name is Andrew Gray, and I live near Elmore and Tudor. First of all, I want to thank Mayor Bronson for being here. I have 2 questions. The first question will need to be answered by Mayor Bronson. So at the work session on Friday, there was some confusion about what would trigger surge capacity. And what I heard was 45 degrees Fahrenheit. I also heard that the director of the facility and or the mayor could decide that surge capacity needed to be triggered. And based on that, I feel like the surge capacity is the capacity, because when we need 330 beds, we're going to have 330 beds. We know we're going to probably need 330 beds. So when I hear Mr. Weddleton say that 200 is not a huge facility, 330 is. And a couple of months ago, there was a resolution to reduce the navigation center to 150 with a 50-person search, which would be a total of 200. I spoke as a member of the Campbell Park Community Council, and I begged every assembly member individually to please pass a resolution to reduce the size to 200. And what happened was, Mayor Bronson said that if they did that, he would pull out of the homelessness plan entirely, that all 5 pillars would collapse. And so what I ask today is, if the assembly agrees to reduce the size of this shelter at Elmore and Tudor, would the mayor be willing to support all aspects of solving homelessness in Anchorage?
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Appreciate the question. I've made a public commitment just in the last few days, again, to Michelle Brown and members of this committee, that I will not pull out of the overall agreement with the navigation center, and that's kind of common knowledge, actually. I will not pull out of the entire agreement, and I will support all 5 platforms or planks of the platform. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. That's a wonderful relief to all the people who live in the area who want a smaller shelter. Thank you. My second question is about the Golden Lion. I understand that the Golden Lion has been used as a for-profit facility. Why is it okay for taxpayer money to support a business so that people can make money, but it's not okay to use it for its intended purpose as a substance misuse treatment facility? And that's for everybody. I'm just curious. Thank you so much.
Sure. The facility was not used for a for-profit company. They actually, I don't know their business model, but we did not charge them, and we have the ability to not charge them under our rules for real estate because I believe they were a nonprofit. Am I correct on that? I'll get more information on that, but
we're talking about WICA?
You're talking about WICA, yes. I don't know how much they charge for their services, but I think they actually did end up losing money in providing that service. But just so you know, in regards to the Golden Lion, I don't have an answer for the future of that. I think that's still being discussed, and maybe Felix, you can answer a little bit more about that in the working group. But just so the public understands, there has been interest in it, and there has been proposals to purchase it, but none of those proposals have been acted upon because there's still that facility is still being discussed. So
thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments.
Speaker number 12, Scott.
Hi, my name is Scott Eggleston. I live on Checkmate Drive. I'm fairly new to Anchorage. I've been here about 2.5 years, but I really have appreciated all the comments everybody's. I'm definitely not as well versed as probably anybody else in this room in this situation, as far as statistics or anything like that. But I think it's common knowledge that we all know anywhere you have a homeless shelter is going to be a challenge. I'm totally in favor of helping homeless people. But my concern, of course, probably a lot of other people here has been stated already. The safety is an issue, property value, obviously. I'm not sure if there's any easy answers, but I was just curious for all the people up here that are supporting the placement of the shelter, how close you would live to it. We could just poll everybody. Are you within like a 5-mile radius of the shelter where you're currently living?
I can tell you, I live fairly close to it. And so, to answer your question, I live very close to it, within a mile of it.
Go ahead, everybody, could you answer?
Yeah, I can speak for myself. I own a business on Tudor, and I'm all on board now. I can fully come out and say that I originally, when we came out with the 4 pillars, what I didn't know then, and I've learned a lot in these last few weeks, and so I am in full support of it. I think every person on the street deserves love and humanity, and we haven't offered that in a really long time. And I think now you see a bipartisan body on this stage, and now's the time. I think we have a lot of community momentum, and I think now's the time to really hone in and focus in on it.
Since I came on in November on this project with Rochelle Alger, it took me a little while to really find the compassionate approach that this has become. This is a great step forward, but I lived off of Laird Lane off of Patterson for 7 years. My kids were born there, and 3 years moved out, but I had 2 houses there, and I enjoyed East Anchorage. I'm born in East Anchorage. My dad was a longtime coach in East Anchorage. I know Junior's from East Anchorage. We both cut our teeth there. So, but when I immersed myself in the project planning, I really found value in the compassionate approach to care. And beyond my project manager involvement, I'm trying to keep this project on the critical path, getting to the next stage, and really make sure that the public dollars are spent to the best of their ability. And I really found comfort as a taxpayer, as a landlord. I've been a landlord for 15 years, just a small property, but landlord nonetheless. But I'm really proud of the way the money is being spent and the compassionate care that comes with this. So.
I don't know if we're going down the line and I just leapfrogged everybody, but I would think everyone in this room lives very close to a shelter. Every single one of us right now. It's our trails and our parks and our alcoves and the backs of your businesses and so on. My house, there's occasionally homeless nearby. My business, I believe, is probably within a mile of the largest shelter in Anchorage, Chester Creek Trail. What we need to do is fix that. And that's what we're proposing here, is to augment the traditional system with facilities so we can fix that. And that has the variety of components that you've seen here, and also a entry point with a second navigation center so we don't threaten the old Brother Francis system with going over its capacity again and destroying that neighborhood. By having 2, we will prevent that. Could this shelter be shrunk? Sure, why not? All that does is leaves more people in the woods where we don't want them. We all live near shelters now. We're here today to fix that.
I represented East Anchorage on the assembly. Went to East High School. I own a rental property on the Tudor Muldoon curve. So I have a vested interest in the location as well, and I support where it's going.
I was born and raised in Alaska. I'm an avid trail user. I frequently use the trails. I call them the Elmore ball fields, which is kind of a nickname some of the runners have given those trails. And I am looking forward to still using those trails even after the navigation center is built. I don't feel as a woman using those trails by myself that I would feel threatened. I'm still planning on using those as frequently as I ever have. I went to Diamond High School, never lived on the east side. I'm fortunate to live 5 houses away from my mother, and unless she moves, I'm not moving. But I will still continue to use those trails frequently.
And just so you know, we're not invested in this area ourselves. I live about 3-4 miles from it, but my wife's office is about 400 to 500 yards from this facility, or from the corner of Tudor and Elmore. So, and she's not immune to some of the problems that are in that area, but again, and her safety is probably the most important thing in my life. So we're very well aware of it. And she works in an unsecure building. So, you know, we look for a long time for a site, a lot of satellite photos, a lot of things. This is the one site where it's the least impact. And I'll be honest with you, I think about the people down that are just blocks away from the Sullivan Arena, what they're suffering. And we routinely get their photos and their comments, and we send Parks Department down there, Police Department down there to help clean things up. But it's the Sullivan Arena, and I've walked it many times. I've also walked the Chester Creek Trail many times. The Sullivan Arena is if you were going to design a place that wasn't for problematic people, you would design the Sullivan Arena. There's a lot of dark corners. There's a lot of areas that you can't enforce that don't have cameras. It's dark. It's dingy. It's frankly, the way it's being operated, it's depressing. This is going to be a well-lit facility with skylights, with open air areas. It's going to be new. We've looked at even little, which may seem like little things. Every bed is going to have an electrical outlet. You may think, oh, what's the big deal? Well, if you walk the trails and talk to the people living in the blue shacks, they all got their little generators sitting there. They need their phones charged so they can access the services. So something as simple as an outlet at every bed that gives them a sense of home. I think somebody talked about it earlier. They need a sense of their own place. That's a little thing, but to them, it's a big thing. And, you know, we've heard over the months, over the years, I'm sure John has heard, some people say, you know, let's essentially throw these people away. Put them on Fire Island, put them on cruise ships out in the bay. I mean, we've heard a lot of nonsensical things. I'll be honest with you, the same faith that drives me to take care of these people drives me to this notion. You don't throw people away. But this is a really difficult problem. It's actually not as big, but it's more difficult because we're dealing with a lot of different people with a lot of different opinions. This is more difficult than the port. And I spent a lot of time on port issues. But it's because we're dealing with human beings. Every one of them is an individual. So, you know, if you have 1,000 homeless people in your city, you've got 1,000 different problems that you got to solve. We try to gather them together, people that have the same package of problems, and then handle them as a group to the best degree that you can. But there's no single fix to this. If there has, we'd go and we'd find a city that's done it perfectly and we just imitate them. But we're copying cities like Houston's done fairly well. Reno has done fairly well. We're looking at, I've looked at length at Helsinki. Helsinki, they thought they had a 35% reduction in homelessness was a really good outcome. That for us, that's unacceptable. We have to do better than that. And they're held up as a model throughout the world. So, and I've got to applaud, especially Meg, who makes a living out of doing this. This is really difficult work. I applaud the team. That's the facilitated team. Very difficult. We've kind of come to the middle here on location and size, and we're still looking at internal functionality of the building and still on looking at the design. But if anyone thinks there's a fix here, like a complete fix, It just doesn't exist. So I'm trying to manage expectations here. This is a mess, but this site, this location, maybe it's not the best. Let's call it the least worst. But I mean, all areas of the city, it seems like now, or, downtown is really suffered for decades under this. And now for a couple of years, the Sullivan area, those neighborhoods have really suffered. We're not here to do, if BFS, Brother Francis, was 1.0 and Sullivan was Brother Francis 2.0. We're not here to make this Brother Francis 3.0, because we have to operate differently, and to operate correctly and to operate better, you need a better designed facility. That's why we call this design build. It's designed as best we can for this problem. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I get speaker number 13, Chris?
I want to join the others who have thanked you for your work with a very knotty problem that is probably never going to go away. But I do have some concerns about the navigation center as proposed in this location. My concerns center on the impacts on Far North Bicentennial Park, which I am a frequent user year-round, and also on the impact on the University, College Gate, and Campbell Creek neighborhoods, because, I mean, as you, Mayor, so well described, the impacts of a shelter for unhoused people is huge on anybody who lives near them. And that's why I really think that putting them anywhere near a neighborhood, if there's any other possible site, is a bad idea. As far as my concerns for Far North Bicentennial Park, I'm concerned about a repeat of what we've seen happen around the Sullivan, with the frequent camping along the Greenbelt. And then we've already had one fire within the Far North Bicentennial Park related likely to homelessness or camping, illegal camping. So I would ask, what steps would be taken to protect the parklands, and as far as just the natural resource, but also the safety of the park users. And then my other question is what can be done for the protection of the neighborhoods surrounding this proposed shelter. I think that the $9 million that have been allocated or requested for this facility could go a long way to acquiring smaller properties that would be able to quickly receive people having gone through a navigation center, perhaps at a more central location that's not near a residential area. There are a lot of big, vacant, big box stores in this town right now. I drive past them on Diamond every day. And I do wonder about if you had a navigation center where you could quickly help people through a process of finding a suitable housed location, at least for a short term, and have many smaller facilities that would go a long way toward helping the problem. And another thing, just having read a wonderful letter in the newspaper from a downtown worker concerned about public urination and defecation, we need more public restrooms that are cleaned and monitored in this town. I've traveled all over the world, and some countries do provide a lot of public restrooms and would be less of a problem. Thanks. So if you could address the safety question about protecting the park and park users, that would be helpful.
Hello, Chief Schrage with AFD. His department is looking at the 35% design, and they have a couple different methods that they're going to mitigate any kind of safety concerns and fire concerns. We've also implemented we've increased the frequency of fire hydrants and other fire suppression systems. And then as we get further down the design, there's going to be some other fire suppression efforts to be able to mobilize for rapid mobilization. And then as far as the campfires, that type of thing, within the radius of that block and others in the parks, they've also have that under consideration. So, and then I would also address the pedestrian safety issue, work with the state of Alaska. There's a designated entity that is really hyper focused on the pedestrian, factors and incidents and those stats from recent years. And so that's quite a focal point on mitigating any pedestrian vehicle issues. So it's part of the design that they're trying to figure out how to channel pedestrian traffic, to take them to that overpass, to go over the road, and then keep people from walking across lanes of traffic. So we're looking forward to seeing the 35% design comments and all those comments that are incorporated.
When you say 35%, what is that?
That's just the initial, that's actually the first time everybody is seeing that, the structure sitting on the site, where, designated pathways are going to be, where are the restrooms in relation to the building. For the first time, everybody's seeing everything the way where it's at. There's nothing too exciting to see yet. Right now, it's just mechanical and electrical. So we're looking at those right now, but we are able to see the structure where it sits on the site in relation to Tudor and the overpass. And so those comments, we collected APD's comments, and we got that to the design team. We have Meg Zolotels from the Coalition of Homelessness, and so we have her comments, and she had some great comments. She's not here tonight, but where's she? Okay, Meg has some awesome comments, by the way. Really how to make it welcoming, some stuff that I remember, and it's one of those things from the last listening session, I want to show how everyone's comments will be reflected in the design of this facility. And the only way to see that is at the next stage of design. So at 65%, a lot of those comments you'll see. So like with Meg, I'll address you. The half walls, clear line of sight, being welcoming when you come into the facility. The architect really honed in on those comments. And anyway, that's at 65%. That's when we'll get to really see that being addressed.
Okay, but I vote for smaller, dispersed.
Mr. Weddleton had some comments for you as well.
Hi, Chris. So a couple points. One is we have a shelter licensing system, and that requires for a quarter mile around any shelter a no tolerance zone. So it'd be immediate camp abatement for anybody who tried to set up a camp or did anything. And we also added a code a year or so ago that the fire department could designate an area, a park, absolutely no tolerance for any camping immediately if it's based on a fire issue. So some of these fire issues that people have brought up, in the area would be, mitigated by that. AFD could look at that area and say, there will be no camping here at all. But also challenge the assumption that a shelter destroys a neighborhood. That's simply not true. There are shelters all across the country that don't. We had an example of Brother Francis was far beyond capacity. We had with Beans Cafe was feeding people generally there, drew people there. It was just a combination of things there that really was bad. And a lot of it was over capacity. And if we were to rely on Brother Francis as the only low barrier shelter with navigation, we will end up there again. We need to have we need more capacity in that. So it is separated. We have it in a different place. But it is absolutely wrong. I have visited shelters all across the country, and I have never seen anything that was as bad as we saw at Brother Francis, that it's worse. There are some, we mentioned Pine Street Inn, and there are $1 million condos right across the street. If you go there, you don't know it's a shelter. I visited shelters in Omaha, and the key is they had services. And, I visited Lincoln, Nebraska not too long ago, and the key is they have services, and they do not have to impact the neighborhood. And as far as the fires, those are people who are not in the shelters. And we're trying to augment the system so we have more capacity, make it more pleasant, functions better, so people want to come in and they know they have a path to housing. No one wants to stay in a shelter forever. It's not designed for that. That's the entry point. And we say, we're going to be getting you into housing. And we increase the system for doing that. And we're seeing the successes right now to Sullivan, moving people out. We'll continue to do that. And that's why with confidence, we can say, we think in 2 years, we won't need this for disuse anymore. Thanks.
Speaker number 14, Robin.
Short. Good evening. I'm Robin Dublin. I live up in Stuckagon Heights. And before I start with my comments, just a couple of thoughts. One is I'm hearing that, and it says here in the proclamation that to measurably end homelessness as a population. And I think that would be a wonderful world. but we live in a community and in a state that has problems that create homelessness. So this idea that we are going to build something that is going to take care of the people that are here now that are currently not housed, and then we're going to be able to shut this thing down and all is going to be well, to me is completely unrealistic, sadly. But I've lived in Alaska long enough to see that there are too many social situations and constructs that will create more people who are struggling with the same things that the people that I saw today walking down Fifth Avenue are struggling with. So I just want to get that out. I am opposed to the location of the navigation and shelter center. And, part of that is because for me, I live in Stuckagin Heights. And if there's a fire in my neighborhood, they'll work to get us out, but they're not going to save our structures. So my home would burn if there was a fire that runs uphill. Fires run very quickly uphill. So for me, that, I hear about fire mitigation. It takes time to find out that somebody is camping somewhere. They don't just camp and suddenly someone goes, oh, there they are, and we remove them. So this idea that fires are not going to be an issue, I think, is also just unrealistic. For me, I'm like the gal that was before me, who is a big-time recreation user in Bicentennial North. Bicentennial North is important to a lot of people who recreate there. I ski there, I run there. I used to run there, I walk there. I bike there. There are numerous camps summer camps that use that area. Junior Nordic uses that area. This is a place where children and families and single women like myself recreate. And for me, I can appreciate that you don't feel concerned, but I have not gone down that Chester Creek area in the last 7 or 8 years because I feel unsafe. I carry bear spray when I go out in the woods. I was a bear guide. I'm not afraid of bears. I carry bear spray because I'm concerned for my safety if there's somebody else who's living there feeling like that's their home and they're going to protect themselves in their home. So to me, safety is a real issue. I also live in a city that is like no other city in the country or probably in the world. We have nesting loons, nesting eagles. We have bears that are, raising their young. This is an incredible place where you're about to put a large shelter. And I hear you say, 200 is not large, 200, 300, it's large. So for me, I think I appreciate your effort and your work, but when I hear that it's a long process to change commercial places into change zoning, let's change zoning. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Speaker number 15, Hillary.
Hi, my name's Hillary Morgan. Hi, everybody up there. So you've all heard this for months now, so I don't want to reiterate what everyone's been saying. I'd rather get some answers. Felix, you had said, well, first I want to say the definition of a low barrier shelter is providing shelter for individuals without imposition of identification, time limits, or other program requirements. And I've run many shelters in my career, and low barrier shelters are very difficult because it is difficult to actually ask people to leave because it's a low barrier shelter. It's different from a no barrier shelter, absolutely, but it is very difficult to figure out what to do with the folks who are most difficult to house. And Felix, you said that HUD and some other folks are working to house 10 people a day so that the number is moved down to 200 by the time you move in. How many people did you house during the Sullivan Arena stay? How many people were housed in the last year?
Yeah, so I don't have that exact number. I do know that there was a housing surge in place, which the coalition and our other nonprofit partners really helped. I can do my best to try to get an answer before the end of today and say that out publicly.
Well, it definitely wasn't 10 a day. I mean, that would be about 3,000 people. And so, the issues in this town have always been housing. That has always been the stumbling block to
providing a permanent solution for homelessness, which, as you all know, is housing. There's no other way around it. Density housing in this town is very difficult to build because people don't like density housing. Tiny housing is very hard to build. So I understand that the wording of this is all around, housing first, which is a great model. I worked at a program in New York City where we took people directly from the streets and put them into housing. So we bypassed the entire shelter system because it's antiquated. And you're pretty much moving Sullivan to this area up on Elmer and Tudor, and it's going to be a 300. If it has capacity for 330, that's what's going to be there. And I am very opposed to the location and the size. I also live in Stuckagon Heights. It's a one-way road. Fire goes uphill, as the previous person said. And I think that if you pass something that says it has to be 150 to 200 people, that you might be able to work with that. But as an entry point, we have entry points. We have the Rescue Mission, Brother Francis Shelter, McKinnell Shelter, Covenant House. We have entry points already that you could move people directly from those entry points into housing if you actually did have the housing. So I'm really curious. I would like to have whoever can answer this question really tell me exactly where the housing is coming from that you're going to be putting these 300 people in so that after 2 years, you're going to be able to close this down. Thanks.
So yeah, thanks for that. So I do have some information here from the Coalition to End Homelessness. They do a monthly update to the Assembly's Committee on Housing and Homelessness, and they provide us with data on the housing surge. So overall, the total number is 179 individuals that were housed through the housing surge effort. Pretty much every month, it's between 22 on the low end, 50 on the high end of individuals that are housed through that program.
So it was 179 total since the Sullivan's been up?
So that's that number is actually from the time frame of October of last year to March of 22. I think that's so that is the data that the coalition has regarding the housing surge. I'm not sure if there's any prior data to that.
And sorry, just one follow up. So I know that they're putting people into temporary hotels. Is that what you're also calling permanent housing, or are you actually talking about people that are moving into their apartments where they can live permanently?
No, so that's separate from the non-congregate hotels that you might be thinking of. This is a separate effort.
And so can you tell me where the housing is coming from that where you're going to move these 330 people?
Thank you for your comments. Speaker number 16, Jessica.
Okay, so the first thing I want to bring up is the discussion around the design of the program. And I think that you are doing this backwards. I think you need to design the program and then build the shell around it. There are a lot of facets of the programming that you guys have been talking about that will require very specific design schematics. Like if you are going to provide intensive case management on site, you have to have private spaces for people to go to be able to provide that. I agree with people talking about surge capacity. Either you can hold 300 people or you can't. The design that I've seen involves spaces with the half walls that you were talking about. So I am wondering how that will work for surge capacity. Does that mean the navigation center goes away and you stand up more of those cots? Does it mean that when you are operating under surge capacity, you no longer have that divided area and you just have cots willy-nilly all over the place? Something that I think has been missing from all of these conversations is the voices of the people who are experiencing homelessness right now. I would ask everybody at this table if you have been to the Sullivan Arena and talked to people who are experiencing homelessness. Have you been to a camp and talked to someone who is camping? Have you talked to them about the barriers and what is preventing them from going into shelter or what is preventing them from finding housing? There is an extreme shortage of units in the city, and there's an extreme shortage of units that are able to provide services to registered sex offenders, to people who have barrier crimes or people who have evictions on their record. So I would be interested in knowing how you're planning on addressing those specific high needs. You talked about the conversation about low barrier and the definition of low barrier. That is 100% the definition. You cannot put a time limitation on someone in a low barrier shelter. You cannot put a services restriction on someone in a low barrier shelter. So you cannot require that they engage in services. There are people at the Sullivan Arena who have been there almost since the start. So you talk about this being a place where someone would come, they would receive services, and then they would move on to housing. I would ask that you look very closely at what hasn't been working. There is a navigation center in Anchorage at the Sullivan Arena, and it has not successfully housed people. So look at what has been happening at the Sullivan Arena. Talk to people who are experiencing homelessness. Go out to camps. Go out with your camp abatement crew. I see this as a way to criminalize homelessness, and that is extremely concerning to me.
Saxton's gonna talk about the design of the building and some of the questions about surge, and then maybe Joe.
There's a lot to cover, but I will speak to this project has the benefit of learning from what didn't go well at the Sullivan or what is not going well, the lessons learned. And that couldn't be more important. So that's a great point. And that is very critical as part of our design that we are trying to address what didn't work and fixing that. The programming, everything else. Again, this project has the benefit of a very, very successful design team, which the previous project didn't have what we have. So big thank you to the assembly. That $800,000 has given us the best design team that we could possibly have. And we also benefit from using term contractors. So we were able to get them under contract fairly quick to help us through this process. And so I will just add that, working with homeless individuals might be a part that we can integrate more. Alexis was out sleeping, or Alexis, you did some of the experiences, yourself. I never got the invite to that, by the way. I could have done that. But there's been a lot of integration between harvesting those lessons learned to incorporate that into this design. So great point, and we are doing that.
Are there service providers on your design team that are people who would potentially be bidding on these services to be able to operate the shelter?
We have to be careful on that because, actually Rochelle kicked one out of a room one day because they can't be a part of proprietary information and then bid on the project. So I learned that was an awkward moment. But we are the ones that aren't vendors, but also subject matter experts, as Meg brings up. We've integrated and drawn from their experience.
And then Mr. Rivera has something for you.
Thanks. So I really, really appreciate your comments. And as you were talking about, have you done this? Have you done that? I think both John and I were looking at each other like, yep. Yeah, we've done that and we've done that.
I know you guys have.
And we have learned so much from having those experiences. Going to your point about making sure we bring the voices of people experiencing homelessness, I have been a huge advocate of trying to make sure that we bring those voices to the table. And that's why I did ask the administration, I'm just going to put this out publicly, did ask the administration to have one of these types of sessions at the Sullivan or somewhere where folks can easily go who would benefit from this. And I hope that request becomes a reality.
I would love to help arrange that if you guys want that.
Great, I'm sure someone will get in touch with you. And then Yeah, so, I can tell you from my perspective, I wouldn't be at this table and on this stage and working as hard as I am if this was anywhere near what I know that some people think it is, which is an effort to criminalize homelessness. Because one, that's illegal. And if that happens, someone please sue us. I probably shouldn't say that, but I'm going to say it. It's just wrong, right? That's not where I come from in this work. And I just knowing the folks at this table, I know that's not where they come from. But we have a lot of work to make sure that folks feel comfortable with the program and make sure that it isn't going to achieve those goals, that the goals we are achieving are actually to house people. And we need to prove that to you.
And then I'm going to give you a card so we can get in contact. Thanks so much.
Speaker number 17, Yarrow.
Hi. I won't belabor the point, but I am in agreement with what others have said about smaller shelters being more evidence-based. I would also like to ask, how much does the municipality plan to spend on programming, and how does it plan to sustain that funding? This is essential to knowing whether we will have a well-run facility or simply a warehouse for humans. I would also like to ask for a little more honesty and a little less sales pitch. Drug and alcohol-free is someone's personal preference and not low barrier nor best practice. We do actually have plenty of empty B3 zoned buildings all over Anchorage. As far as I understand, the Pine Street Inn is an entire system of smaller targeted shelters and housing units, not a single location mass shelter. This shelter will not close in 2 years. If you really expected that, I think you would be spending less than $10 million on it. And if you build a building to accommodate 330 people, you will fill it. I do support this navigation center, but I do not support the size of it. I believe that removing the so-called surge, winter, overflow, below 45 degree, mayor can turn on when he wants capacity, would alleviate a lot of the mistrust and resentment that is felt in my neighborhood by East Anchorage and UMed residents that have not been heard. I see in the paperwork that you gave today a treatment plank. So I wanted to ask, does this mean that the mayor, and thank you for being here, by the way, has decided to stop catering to his campaign donors and holding up progress and using the Golden Lion for its intended purpose as a treatment facility? I just wanted to point out that had you, Mayor Bronson, set the Golden Lion up as a treatment facility when you took office shortly after the Assembly purchased it, we could have this much needed service online right now. We could have people on the path to healing and recovery right now. Instead, we have a building that sits empty when it's not being used for your friends to set up their for-profit businesses. Alongside the Navigation Center, please focus on treatment to navigate to. The Salvation Army facility will not offer enough beds. Use the Golden Lion for its intended purpose. Stop wasting time and money. Use it for a treatment facility. Stop letting it gather dust. Stop letting people set up shop in it. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments.
Speaker number 18, Ed.
Hey guys, I'm Ed Check. I live and work in the UMed district over there where the homeless shelter is proposed. And I'd say I'd have to be against it at this point, guys. I mean, $9 million, please don't waste that amount of money putting a brand new facility over there. And it is like, for one thing, I walked in here, I started hearing counselors. You're not going to be able to staff it. I'm sorry, there's not enough professionals in this city to kind of deal with the problem that you're trying to deal with. So, and then secondly, I'm really not against people camping in the woods. I'm all for it. But the unfortunate thing is they can't pick up their trash and other disgusting stuff that gets left in those woods. And I'm a frequent user of those trails, so it disheartens me very much to hear that you're basically leading people out into the pristine wilderness to create more blight in our city. I think our city has enough blight that we all have to look at and deal with on a daily basis, that we shouldn't have to create more blight in a very beautiful neighborhood where there's a lot of nature going on, there's trails. Like, the problem is, I haven't ever seen any one of you on the trails, so I don't think, you maybe don't understand the amount of blight that happens in our city on those trails. And it's sad that, we can't use 9 mil to kind of beef up the systems in the city that we already have. We have to go about developing new systems and, building new things, creating more blight for our city, and just thrashing the beautiful areas that we already have that, we have the Sully. Let's use the Sully for what we've been using it for. It's already pretty thrash at this point. I'm not very happy about what I see down there, but 9 mil, let's clean it up. Let's, get more programs out there cleaning up those woods. Maybe we can even hire some of them to help clean it up for us. So, just kind of in closing, I don't feel like wasting $9 million creating a new shelter is going to make any difference at all. It's going to create a new problem. So if you ever heard of Romer's Law, it basically states if you build it, they will come. You want to put 330 people over there, you're going to fill it every night, I bet. But you're also going to trash a very beautiful area. And I think you're going to just kind of waste a lot of money when it could be better spent, like buying a warehouse that's already built and reconverting it, or doing a lot of other things that we could, that's already built. We don't need to go around building new things and creating more blight in our city. It's very sad to see the blight that's already going on. I think we should use the 9 million to get rid of that blight and make our city better and get our services that we already have in place beefed up. 9 mil, let's do it.
Thank you for your comments.
Speaker number 19, Irene.
Hi, I want to thank you, the working group. You've done a lot of work, and like so many people said, thank you for all the effort you have put into it. I wasn't going to talk about it, but since Yarrow brought it up, the Golden Lion, just to purchase the Golden Lion cost over $9 million, no renovation whatsoever to get it operational. It is not a cost-effective building. I have a couple comments I want to start with that I'm not criticizing your opinion. People who know me, I go to the assembly meetings, I provide reality. I like to call it that. John, you said it right. Everybody lives close to a shelter. There are camps on the coastal trail. There are camps in Midtown. There are camps in Campbell Park. There are camps down where Campbell Park hits Minnesota. Camps are everywhere. This is not something that's unique to the Stuck Again area where we're now discussing the shelter. Same with the fire danger. Where the camps are, the fire danger is there. So somebody who lives in Westchester Lagoon where there's a camp, any house there can burn down when somebody camps and does a fire. Some people said that we need a centrally located facility that's not anywhere near residential areas. There is no such thing. If it's centrally located, it's near residential areas. When you talk about, people need to be transported, that's one of the reasons why this particular location is being considered, because there are bus routes. Then you don't need, or you need a smaller amount of minibuses. Everything costs money. If you want to, you don't want huge shelters, but you also don't want 20 different small shelters, because you have a balance. It's a financial balance. If you want your taxes to go up, we can have 20 very small shelters. It all needs to get paid for. And I'm not saying we should only have one big shelter and no small shelters. All I'm trying to do is there is a balance somewhere in there. There is what you would really, really like, and then there's what you can afford. And like I said, if you don't want if we have 10 shelters and we have the same services in every shelter, that makes your taxes go up drastically because you have to staff them all with the same people. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Speaker number 20, Stephen.
Thank you for coming this evening. Last time I was here, we spoke about the conditional use permit. I think we done enough talking on that. A few things I'd like to point out was something that was mentioned earlier about regarding the programming. Usually for a facility, you would do the programming first, 35% plans, you would go out to perhaps a design build contract. That's my understanding. This is going to be a CMGC contract. How many CMGC contracts has the city put forth in the past?
I will hand that over to Sexton.
I don't have the total count, but most recently was the solid waste services maintenance facility, and very relevant. I can't remember the total magnitude on that, but no, not that one's CMGCE as well. Yeah, the $100 million solid waste transfer station, but then also solid waste service at Eagle River.
Right. Okay.
And so it was a CMGC. And so we did reference a lot of those practices in the purchasing department as well.
Okay.
So yes. And so there's a traditional relationship in scheduling and how you go from one definable feature to the next. The traditional method is called the waterfall. There's a start and finish predecessor that's inherent with that process. What CMGC offers us in this is to help us meet the timeline. There's two delivery methods that are critical to meeting this timeline that we consider. There's design build or CMGC. CMGC is also referred to as construction manager at risk, CMAR. And so what we're doing is we're fast tracking. So there's a start finish, but there's multiple start finish predecessors. And we're focusing on the longest of the lead items, which is the structure, and then everything else underneath it. Now, on the project management side, the construction side, there's, Joe at Department of Health working on the programming. Just so you'll see, if you saw a schedule, you would see the structure, the HVAC, all the support equipment, programming, everybody is running simultaneously to a start and finish, and everything drops, which identifies a critical path. But I don't get into the weeds, but it's a fast track method to getting to where you want to be.
Right. I took some project management class. Okay. I know the lingo. So it's not a usual contract mechanism for the city. It is typical of DOT. Okay. So my concern is sometimes these contracts get out of hand. At the last minute, they get canceled. They go with someone else. What are the chances of that happening?
That is, so that's a very good point. So Rochelle at purchasing, she's under negotiations for a not to exceed price, which GMP, a guaranteed maximum price.
Right.
Obviously, the contractor under contract is the construction manager right now. We have them under contract. Obviously, we're talking about the project we want to build. So they're developing, so they have like 35% design right now. So they're pricing out that what we want, what they're seeing with all the comments from stakeholders. They will give us an estimate and we can see exactly what the cost is going to be for this project. It'll be the most accurate to date. The unit pricing for the structure to the utilities to everything each definable feature will be priced out. We will reference that. We have a third-party estimator who will confirm pricing. We have a completely uncontaminated bid coming in separate from theirs that we can look at unit pricing to see if it's accurate, and we will negotiate a contract for them to be our general contractor. So there's the CM, the GC. We have them as the CM. We are not sure we will use them as the GC until we agree on pricing. We will have a guaranteed maximum price when we sign that contract, not to exceed.
Okay, so this 9 million we've been throwing around here, is that part of the resolution?
I believe our S version.
That's a separate standalone resolution that appropriates dollars.
So the 9 million is not going to be the guaranteed maximum price.
No, I mean, we have the 800,000 for design. We're sitting on $2 million for the structure. So.
2 million for the structure?
Correct. Well, it's a draw, so a work package. So, you know, you have the work packages for each one. So once we feel comfortable with the certain features, say like the air handler, we know 29,700 square feet. We're comfortable with the size of air handlers we need. Once we approve our design, we will order that work packages. So the longest lead item is the structure, and that's the one we're looking at ordering first. So 2 million is what we're looking at for the structure. Correct. And that includes shop drawings and that engineering effort for that.
Okay, good. Next question. Someone else brought this up as well. Where are you going to get the funding over the long term to run this? Once again, I don't see this being a 2-year deal. I see this being a much longer term situation. I mean, has anyone looked at, we have the alcohol tax that's bringing in what, 14 million a year. Is that going to, portion of that going to be used to run this? Has anyone looked at the infrastructure money that's coming to Alaska to fund this construction and maybe do a good job on the landscaping or something?
So as I talked about these points at the beginning of our session today, the mayor will be requesting that the ARPA 2 funds, we're talking to the assembly about the possibility of using those for the operating related costs. And there may be some other community development block grant funds that might be available. So we're going to explore all possible options. And our goal is, in a perfect world, the alcohol tax proceeds will be able to continue funding the existing services. But we have to evaluate all these possibilities regarding the funding.
Okay, have you identified what the annual cost is going to be?
No. Okay, as I mentioned at the beginning of our forum, the estimated cost for the first 6 months is 2.5 million. That is an estimate because we're currently, listening to what folks say about the programming. That's getting factored into the design. And so then we'll be able to establish what the operating costs are.
Okay, so that'll be included in 9 million, right? No, okay, that'll be above and beyond 9 million, okay. Okay.
Thanks so much for your comments. We don't have any more question and answers, so I want to say a little something, and then Felix is going to say something, and we'll close out for the night. I just want to thank each and every one of you guys for coming out tonight. I really appreciated all the comments, except for the one where I didn't run on trails because I'm trying to get skinny out here for summer. Hey, so I really want to tell everyone I appreciate all the comments. Today I felt was very friendly. It was very welcoming and opening to conversation, good or bad. We addressed some of the issues that the community were having. And so I just sincerely, from the bottom of my heart and from the administration, I want to thank you guys for coming out and speaking. So I'm going to turn it over to Felix.
Thanks. All right, so just a couple of points. So first is, I mentioned the map earlier. As I understand it, there are printed handouts of that map so that you could just see generally where the 4 facilities that we're looking at sort of system-wide are located or being proposed to be located. And then second is regarding, someone asked me about the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness housing surge efforts. So I gave you that 179, and that's again from mass cared housing placements from October 2021 to March 2022. They do have some data, I believe that's on their dashboard. If you want to take a look at that, that goes before that. But in terms of where they are looking to place those individuals, they're looking at independent units through the landlord housing partnership, as well as placement of emergency housing vouchers, along with possible temporary transitional housing that's going to be at the guest house. So those are some of the locations that they are looking at in terms of their next steps of continuing to house individuals and meeting that 10 individuals per day. And then I just want to give a shout out for folks for coming today, sharing all of your concerns. I saw a lot of folks furiously taking notes, and I think, like I alluded to earlier, the assembly is going to be taking this up tomorrow, but we have a 12-page agenda if you haven't gotten a chance to look at it. So we got a lot to do tomorrow. It's very unlikely that we are going to get to this. And so the plan is going to be, of course, assuming a majority of the assembly supports it, is to push this specific item along with possibly any other items that we don't complete tomorrow to a special meeting on Thursday. And you'll hear the chair talk more about that tomorrow. And at that meeting, when we start deliberating this item, we're going to do another presentation that's going to have hopefully a lot of answers to the questions that folks keep bringing up. So again, I want to thank you all so much for being here, and I'm looking forward to continuing this process with y'all.